So you are a new insurance agent or aspiring insurance agent, and you probably by now have heard about what a captive agent is versus an independent agent. Maybe you just don't know much beyond that there's this thing called a captive or an independent agent. You want some more information and to ultimately determine what the definition is, maybe on a basic level, but more importantly, what the impact is short and long term to your career by being what's called a captive agent versus an independent agent. As I instructed the live attendees to this training at the moment here, knowing the difference or not knowing the difference can make or break you. And so what I'm going to empower you today was the information of what the differences are between being a captive and independent agent, talk about the pros and the cons. I'm going to take a neutral disposition to give you both sides of the story so that ultimately you can make up your mind which direction to go in your career is best suited for you based on what we're providing. Again, this may not seem like something that is a big deal or you should be concerned with, right? Because it's all about how much commission am I going to get? What carriers am I going to write? Who am I going to work with? All of which are important, but this is an oft overlooked detail to the ultimate end game about how you're going to start your business, but continue it and grow it. And there are agents who find themselves with the wrong pathway that can ultimately end their business before it even starts. So let's get started. My name is David DeFord. I own DeFord Insurance Group. If you're interested in selling final expense in person or over the phone, and you value one-on-one mentorship, training, and support, nobody does it as good as us. Check out daviddeford.com for hundreds of testimonials, case studies, and more information about who we select as agencies and how you can apply to join. And also want to promote our insurance sales success website. This is a free, no-cost platform. Right now, we have a good amount of people watching live. You can watch these YouTube videos live as we record them before they're even released. On top of that, tons of training, scripts, all of my books for free in ebook format and more. If you go to daviddeford.com/ISS, you're welcome to join. Okay. So let's first start off with some definitions. Now that we know why this is important, let's talk about the differences first between captive and independent agents from a definition standpoint, because as we go through and describe pros and cons, a lot of this will start to make more sense as we navigate through things. So first of all, the definition of being a captive agent. A captive agent, think of the root word of captive, captivity, slave, as maybe we'll critique later, and that'll make more sense as we go through it. Captive means you're beholden. You're owned by somebody. You're less free if you're captive. And what that typically implies is that as a captive agent, you generally work for one company in particular and not multiple ones. And there's all sorts of issues, tangents from that as we'll get into. But I want you to think of when somebody says they're captive, it generally means they work with one company only, not multiple companies. So the inverse of captive is being free, right? Independent. Maybe we call it sometimes a broker. All of these are synonymous, interchangeable terms, and they mean that an agent has the ability to contract with multiple carriers simultaneously. They're not beholden to one company. They have options between several. To what degree are the options? It just depends on the variables, right? When I was a final expense agent full-time in the field, I think I had like 15 to 20 companies. So I had tons of options available to me, right? Some agents may only have several. So the base definition, so we understand, captive means you're with one company. Independent means you're with multiple. When I say company, I don't necessarily mean the agency, but carrier access, okay? Everybody make sense of that? Let's continue. Okay. So let's talk about some pros or the captive world first of being an agent. Talk about the pros and the cons, because there are definitely some pros and there's definitely some cons. So let's jump into that. So as a captive agent, number one, I would say probably the biggest benefit to being beholden to one company is by definition, the de facto simplicity that comes from a captive business model. So one of the complaints that you'll hear a lot of these one company carriers and agencies say is that being independent is complicated. You have a lot of different carriers. You have a lot of different prices. You have a lot of different processes from different carriers and how to get business issued on your client. Whereas in our system, we offer you one product to know. That means one set of underwriting rules, one set of rates to be considered, and one product to master. And there definitely is, because of that, an air of simplicity that comes out of it that's beneficial to the agent. You have less technical knowledge to acquire when there's one product with one company to worry about versus a multitude of products with a multitude of carriers. So there's a lot of people that benefit from a captive environment because of its exceptional level of simplicity and product knowledge, so that one can better focus on the sales strategies and then the actual activity of getting out there to help people. So that is a huge advantage when it comes to the captive world, is that it's very easy to learn the product relative to the independent world with multiple products. Also, there is a perception. Now, I say perception. I don't think it's true. I think more importantly, you have to think about what the individual offer the agency is. There's a perception that training and support is better in captive organizations than it is with independent organizations. I think part of that is because the captive model in actuality is not virtually based. In most cases, there's offices to go to, whether it's a call center or an in-person strategy. You get to mingle with other agents, your managers, and there's some kind of intangible benefit from being around others physically in the same environment. And I think by default, because most captive organizations operate that way, to the traditional model versus like what we do, which is virtual, right? I rarely see any of my agents except on Zoom, right, or a phone call. There is a benefit of in-person experience. And I think captive agents sometimes, in some sense, have some kind of training support advantage over a virtual environment, which most independent agents operate in that way. Again, not all independent agencies do so. So I would say there's an edge. Not always across the board is training better with captive organizations, but the fact that you can be in person and I think talk with other agents, right along with other agents, there is, and then witness phone calls and sales calls with other agents, there is an inherent value into that. And this is coming from somebody who has operated everything virtually for so long. I've seen some of the benefits of in-person training, and it's substantial and makes a big difference. Okay. And then the last thing I would say is that one of the most immediate benefits to a captive organization is they offer lead financing. So let me explain to you what lead financing is. So one of the biggest issues agents have is having money or cash on hand to invest in leads, right? This is a business. It requires financial investment, if you're in the final expense business at least. And some agents are afraid of spending money or cannot spend money because of their current financial situation. A lot of these captive organizations are set up inherently to offer what's called lead financing. They essentially give you a line of credit that you can invest into their lead program to finance yourself with leads so that you have people to talk to and go see. And this is a unique advantage. You could argue it may be a disadvantage too, but this is a unique advantage to help you get onboarded, up and running faster, because you're in a position to have fresh leads or have leads of some kind to then go see people and sell to people. Whereas in the independent world, typically, even working with most agencies, there aren't any lead financing programs. It is you buying your own leads and investing in your own leads. That you've got to come up with the money either by borrowing money, using a credit card, or using cash on hand. So for the agent that may be a little more financially strapped, you may see some captive organizations be a better fit to start with, at least, because they answered the biggest question. Even if you got everything in the world that you want, but you have no money to buy leads, the captive organizations with lead financing can be a big benefit to you to get started. Okay. So to me, those are the biggest advantages working with captive organizations. One, a simplified business sales process, because it's one product, it's one carrier, not a multitude of products, not a multitude of carriers. There's an inherent advantage, especially if the captive organization is in person, that I think you'll get an intangible and arguably tangible benefit, seeing people in the flesh actually sell and get to embody or imbue what it is that they do, which I think is more effective than virtual. And then three, lead financing. A lot of people need the money to buy leads, and that's the only thing holding them back from being successful, one of them. And many of these captive organizations have programs with every agent that comes on board to finance their leads to get them started. So those are the benefits of working in a captive. Let's talk about the drawbacks, because there are definite drawbacks to the captive world. And again, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Every business model, and I would give this advice to my son if he got started, there's no perfect business in the insurance business, much less the world of businesses. There are problems in any business. There are good and bad. There are problems when you're rich. There are problems when you're poor. What you've got to do, likewise, is figure out what problems are most acceptable to you, right? And likewise, in business and final expense, there are problems with both captive and independent models. And it comes down to what problems can you manage the best for survival. Back to that survival thing we talked about earlier, because you want to survive this business to be successful. So let's continue. So what are the drawbacks of being captive? To me, this is why I'm not a captive agent. This one drawback I'm about to describe, why I've always been a lifelong independent agent. And that is the lack of options. The idea of simplification, like many things in life, being simple or having simplicity is not necessarily always a good thing. It's a double-edged sword. There are good things about simplification and standardization and sales practices, but there are some bad things too. And I want to make sure that you see both sides of that. And part of that is understanding what the reality of this business is actually like in order to understand why a lack of options or oversimplification ultimately is a bad thing. So the reality of final expense, and I would say even of most life insurance, is this. There's not one singular product that answers effectively, maximally, and it provides the best value of coverage at the best price for every age accepted and every health condition considered. This is why you have problems on the business quality side and business written side more often with captive agents than you do with independent agents. Let me explain. If I'm offering one particular product, and there's no product, you probably are thinking of carriers out there that are one product companies, and that's how they do their thing. There's nothing inherently wrong with those carriers, and it's not the jab at them per se. It's just that any time that you lack options in the insurance world, you lack the ability to close the most possible, offer the best possible, and just as important that you'll never hear from any of these people is retain the most business possible. In a sense, in the insurance business, certainly final expense, it's not what you make in this business that counts, it's what you keep. Not what you make, but what you keep. It's the business that stays that pays. Please remember that. It's very important. So what are the problems with the lack of options? Well, if I roll up on Mildred, 70 years old, still smoking her Virginia Slims, and she's got COPD, and that's all she's got. Otherwise, she's in good shape. I guess she'd still be in good shape. There are carriers in the final expense space that will not offer first day full coverage to that client. Okay, she's taken Spiriva to treat her COPD, still smokes. There are carriers that won't fully protect her from the first day after the first payment is made. And if I'm working with said captive organization, for example, and the best I may be able to offer this client is maybe I won't be able to get her any coverage. So I miss a sale and I miss helping a person. Or maybe I could get her a policy, but they make her wait 2 full years before she's protected fully for natural styles of death. And I have to charge her a price that is way higher than what she could get through other options had I been an independent agent. Now, what culminates because of that? Well, you're offering a product that's inferior in the value of coverage. You're offering a product that's inflated in price compared to the other products. Now, what's going to happen as a fixed income senior after you as the agent leaves the house, even if she loves you, even if she's thankful for the product you sold her? What does a fixed income senior do? I'll tell you. They still get postcards in the mail. They still see stuff on Facebook. They see offers for lower price coverage that's more affordable. And one day soon, typically, I say to my agents in the next 90 days, they will fill out another postcard. They will fill out another Facebook ad, and another agent's going to come by. And what do you think they're going to do as an independent agent when they see that product that's overinflated in price and lower in quality of coverage? 80 to 90% of the time when I saw those, It was the easiest replacement sale in the world because I have options as an independent agent that I can get Mildred with COPD first day full coverage immediately. And it didn't matter that she had a great relationship with the agent. I just do business better. It's nothing personal. It's business. And in that position, what ultimately happens, back to the cons of being captive, is you lose more business because of it. You're not going to keep more of what you sell. You're going to have lapses, which lead to chargebacks, which means you owe more money, which means your overall profitability drops. And those sales you could have gotten, maybe because it was a little more competitive, to maybe replace another inferior product, because as an agent, as a captive agent, you'll come across other companies with inferior products too. You may not be as well equipped to replace those policies as you would have if you're an independent agent. So your sales are lower, all else equal, of course. Sales are lower, kept business is lower, and you have less profitability. And that means you're not going to make as much money. Does that make sense, everybody? And what generally happens, and this is the life cycle of a captive agent, is they come into this business unaware, ignorant, and I mean that with all due respect, of what the inner workings of the business are. And it's through trial and error and experience that the wool is pulled off their eyes, and they see the realities of this business, that their one-trick pony product is not always the best deal. And then it becomes a moral qualm. I'm selling a product that's overpriced. I'm selling a product that doesn't give comprehensive coverage. Am I doing the right job for the client? Now, I would argue something's better than nothing. And as an agent, if you're in the situation, make the best out of a bad situation, offer coverage, help the client. It's better than if you just left them or just quit. But still, what ends up happening is you realize you're not optimizing your capability not only to help the client, but to make the most money for yourself. And this is a problem. A lot of these agents don't realize this 6 months in, 12 until 6 months in, 12 months in. And the other problem with captive organizations is many of them have restrictive covenants in the contract to where, for example, the big one is you don't own your book of business. You don't own it until you've gotten through 2 years with them. And there are organizations where as soon as you realize that I'm not doing the best job for my clients, and if it really weighs on your heart and soul, if you leave, you lose all of those renewal and residual monies. And they don't tell you this when you look at the contract. They just want to shove a contract in your face and just sign it. Look at my 1099. Look how awesome I am. I'm so rich. Just do exactly what I say and you'll be rich too. But they don't show you. They don't want to, because if you didn't know, you didn't own your book of business for 2 years, it starts to change the parameters of what is being pitched. So I say all this because this is a huge issue. You're in a position to where, as a captive agent, if you are going to do it, you're just going to have to accept the fact that you won't always be the best. Most of the times, you'll never be the best option for the client. Granted, something's better than nothing, but you will be replaced more often. You will have less sales because you can't compete on price. You can't compete on value coverage when it matters. And so your conversion rates are lower, your kept rates are lower, and your profitability is lower. And the other thing I'll add to this is commissions generally are lower too. There are well-known captive companies that start their people out at 60%, 70%, 80% commissions, which are really poor, and they make you pay full price for leads, just the same as we charge. And they cast this illusion of greatness because you're going to work with the best in the business to justify the low commission so that the people in the uplines can all be paid. And you're not making as much had you been independent. Now, the argument being captive is that you'll get to lean on and glean on successful people, and there's a place and a time to justify that. I agree. But is the juice really worth the squeeze? If you get started at 100% here and you start at 80% here, and there's a 20% difference in commission, and if all else is equal, you write $200,000 in business, you're losing out on $40,000 in income. That's a lot of money. That's life-changing money extrapolated over many years. And on top of that, probably don't even own the book of business. So as soon as you realize that, you leave. So as you can tell, I think there's a lot of cons with being captive. I think there's some advantages to it. It's some people it's appropriate for, but a lot of agents, there's this cycle that they realize what the fine print says. And before they know it, they're like in a vice grip. And it's like the mafia. They love you while you're there, but they make it hard as hell to leave because you're going to suffer financially, lose all that money, and make the uplines and the managers and the owners rich. Whereas if you're independent, you didn't. Okay. So now let's talk about, and if there's questions about being captive or any of that stuff, throw them in the chat if you're watching this live, daviddufour.com/ISS. If you're watching this as a recording on YouTube, you can join me for free in that site. Lots of free training, and watch these videos as we actually film them. You get advance notice and can attend live as we film them. Wonderful. Okay. So let's talk about the advantages of being independent now that we've talked about the pros and cons of captivity. An independent agent, the biggest advantage is that you have options. Everything I just talked about, dissing the captive agents with one product, one approach, pushing product, it's the exact opposite with being independent. As an independent agent, you're now in the position to offer your clients options. How many options you have, again, that depends on which organization you're with, but you're better off, arguably, as an agent, assisting the client's needs as opposed to pushing the product as you would be if you're a captive. So for all the problems with captivity, you get the benefits of independence. So for example, the homes you walk into, because you have a multitude of options available, you may be able to replace and improve the coverage options for the client that you couldn't if you're a captive. So that means more sales. You may be able to, and many times, offer better value of coverage based off of underwriting standards. For example, Mildred with COPD, we mentioned earlier, she now, as an independent agent, can get full coverage from the first day, whereas maybe with the hypothetical captive company, you couldn't. So that's more valuable coverage. Another thing that's very important that a lot of these captive companies won't describe is that with many captive companies, they reduce your commissions on what we call a guaranteed issue basis or return of premium. Maybe you're paid 80%, but you're really paid 40% on guaranteed issue. Whereas if you got your client, Mildred with COPD, first day full coverage as an independent agent, you'll make, if you're with a commission carriers like us at 100%, you'll make 100% of commission on that. So you've increased your overall commission on that case by 250%. So again, that's another thing. So by writing better policies, you make more commission percentage than had you had to always push a guaranteed issue product. So you're maximizing your commission just on offering better policies. And because you get your client better value of coverage, what's less likely to happen? Them replacing you because another agent walks in the door and tries to offer something better. Now, every agent's going to get replacements, captive or independent, but it generally reduces as an independent agent because you have the capability, and we hope that you take it, to get your client the best value of coverage and price, right? So for example, I'll give you a couple examples here. So as an agent, I remember walking into a home in Anniston, Alabama. Gentleman had a Trinity life insurance plan. We actually represent the company, very good company, very competitive price. Everything about the company is fantastic. And of course, he had taken it out in like the last 6 months or something like this. And he sent back the card because he wanted a better price. And boy, did I try to get him a better price. And there was nothing I could do. And I had to leave that home, and I could have made $1,000 in commission off the sale had I been able to accomplish the task. But because that agent sold the best combination of price and coverage, I was, up the creek without a paddle. If you wanted to ethically sell it, I mean, there's unethical agents out there who try something, but try as I might, I just couldn't do better. Now, that happens daily to agents who sell competitively priced products that have great underwriting terms that match the client and give them the best value. So you're building a wall or a moat around your client, proverbially speaking, and putting them in a position where the sale you make sticks a lot better. And strategically, this is how we teach to Ford Insurance Group agents. We're all independent, of course. We offer a multitude of products. But the strategy and thinking I teach my agents is this. Imagine if yours truly was coming in the door in the next 90 days. How would you sell differently? What products would you sell differently? Because while I may not come in the door, there's another agent who's good in your area that's going to try to penetrate that client's home, get in over the phone or in person, and replace that existing policy. So you have to do the hard work now up front in the presentation to overcome that. And part of that battle, there's certainly a sales element to it, but part of that battle, of course, is selling the right product that's priced well and appropriately designed to match the client's underwriting to optimally give the best coverage. That makes sense, guys? So that's why I think, to me, that is the biggest advantage of being an independent agent. And that comes along with an ethical thing too. And that's kind of what happens as you start to transition in this business. You get into the business, it's like, I'm selling insurance, great, and we learn all this stuff. And then you start dealing with the public and the clients, and you see their situation, you see what your products do and don't do. And then you start to have some revelations about who you are and what you're selling and what it means to sell the product you're representing, and what that reflects on you. If you have any sort of empathetic capacity, if you're just a psychopath, might not bother you. But most of you probably are a little empathetic, and you care about your clients. You want them to get the best. And when you're an independent agent, you can honestly say that. You can say, look, I'm not a product pusher. I'm not beholden to any of these companies. I represent my client because I have options. I don't push product because the captive guy told me to, and he won't allow me to get other carriers or doesn't have the ability to. I'm not beholden. I'm not a company man. I'm a client man. And guys, I'm telling you, if you want longevity in this business, you got to sit right in your mind and your heart with what it is and how it is you're selling. And for me, knowing how I am, and that's just how I am, if I was stuck with one company, I could probably make it work for a while. But then I'm going to realize these people are putting a trust in me. I'm saying things and making promises and claims about the product, knowing there are other products out there. At some point, it wears on your perspective and ethical capacities if you feel that way. I hope you do. So as an independent agent, if that ever wears on you, then just get a look around for more carriers, look at other options, add more coverage. In many cases, there are better options available. And the thing is, when you're an independent agent, because you're not a product pusher, because you represent your client and you work hard to get the best combination of price and value that you can sleep better at night. You're not a psychopath. You're an honest person that's trying to help, and you have the capacity to do so. Harder to do that if you're a captive agent. Not to say that captives are all psychopaths or dishonest, but they know what's going on. You can't deny that there's other options out there 6 or 12 months in. You have to just kind of avoid it and kind of be, operate knowing that. And what does that say about you is kind of my point. Okay. And then the other thing about being independent, compared to most captive organizations, the commissions are a lot better. Most of these organizations start you with the captive organizations around 80 to 90%, sometimes lower. I've seen as low as 60 to 70%, and a responsibility to buy leads. As an independent agent, you typically have access to higher commissions as a beginning agent. We start agents at 100%. If they're in our lead program where they're buying their leads up to 110%, we go all the way up to 130%. So the commissions, generally speaking, if you're an independent agent like the Ford Insurance Group, you make more money per sale. It's very, very important. And again, it matters a lot if you just start to do the math. Most people don't. Hopefully you all do. But for example, hey, if you're at an 80% contract and you could be at 100%, you write $200,000 in a year, that's $40,000 in net income lost. And multiply that by multiple years, put that into an IRA, 10% a year and a, whatever. I mean, it adds up after a while. So again, that's an important thing that you got to maximize too. All right. Now, again, being independent, there are problems with being independent. So let's talk about that, because I love it. Of course, I'm somewhat partial, but there are some drawbacks too. So I want to be clear about that. Probably the biggest drawback to being independent as any kind of agent is that there's more complexity. When you have multiple options, multiple carriers, multiple products, multiple pricing, multiple underwriting, the simple becomes complex. And the more that you need to know, the more overwhelming it is. And the more overwhelmed, the more confused, and confused people don't go sell anything, and nobody gets helped. So there's this extreme. You can be oversimplified, or you can be over complex. Both extremes are bad. You need to be somewhere in the middle. The way we try to mitigate that at the Ford Insurance Group with the new agents, because that's where it's most sensitive at, is and I would recommend this for any agencies or agents out there, is not to do 5 plus, 10 plus carrier contracts as a brand new agent. It's foolish. You need to understand as a new agent, your bandwidth is limited. Okay. You don't go run a marathon the moment you decide that you want to get off the couch and get back in shape. No, you work up to it over the course of months, most likely. Likewise, as a new agent, you're starting the marathon of a grand business and career. So understand you got to condition yourself. So what we do when it comes to carriers is we start agents with 3 companies. That gives you options, that gives you flexibility, but it doesn't overwhelm you to the point where you're not doing the best job for your clients. So it allows you to get up and running, to learn the carrier processes, the applications, the underwriting. And then as you get traction in the business, we encourage our agents to pick up multiple carriers as they go along, as they need. Because as you start getting steam and you start making sales, you start getting excitement and momentum, adding more carriers doesn't slow things down nearly to the extent as it would if you were just starting off. Okay. Even me, I think when I started in the business in 2011, I had American Amicable, Presidential Life, and which is gone now, a guaranteed issue carrier. And then I had one other carrier, I forget what it was, but I had 3 carriers. That's it. And when I asked my upline, Andrew Fike at Equita, I was like, hey, I want Transamerican Royal Navy. He's like, well, wait a few months. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I did wait a few months, and I wanted it sooner, but I waited. And I'm glad I did, because again, you don't know what you don't know, especially as a new agent. You got to trust people, even when you don't understand why you would. And in that case, I didn't, but I'm glad I did, because now I understand it being on the other side where he's at, training agents. You want to simplify to some extent to allow yourself to learn the business. So that is definitely a drawback, because if you don't have that guidance into the effect of getting started, you can overwhelm yourself way too soon. We even see it in the Ford Insurance Group, and I'll yell at my agents in a loving way, of course, like, stop trying to do ACA and Medicare and final expense and annuities before you've even bought leads and gone through our final expense training. Please don't. We try to screen agents out who have that propensity to just overwhelm themselves without any sort of self-restraint. But some people just are enamored by how awesome this business is. You have to actively protect that, because that will slow you down considerably and blow your momentum if you're not careful. The other side of that too, it's not just in products even with one niche like final expense. It's then you could sell ACA, you could sell Medicare, you could sell annuities. Whereas a lot of these captive agents, and I'll give them this, like Lincoln Heritage. Lincoln Heritage just does Lincoln Heritage final expense. They don't do this and that and the other, right? So there is a benefit to that. It's like, we're in one lane. You're either with us or you're not. Not that it's bad to offer different products, but from the simplification and getting going process, by default, that's a very important thing, especially as a new agent. You need to be able to put blinders on and say no to other opportunities getting started. A lot of the MLM business, this is another drawback, is in the, I kind of put this down, but I think it's true really for the captive side too. There's a lot of MLM influence, but right now I would say the independent world is seeing a lot more of it. You'll see these organizations who exalt the fact that they have multiple carriers, just kind of like what I'm talking about here, but they run an MLM model. Meaning they're recruiting people to recruit. Their orientation is not to help you become a successful producer. It's either to recruit anybody with a pulse or to convince you to buy their junk leads that they've resold 1 million times and turn into an enormous profit center. So you got to be very careful. Just because they say they're independent and they're not captive, it's not black and white. There are more variables to that. We're just covering one of those variables and picking an agency. But you got to be very careful, because a lot of the big time recruiters these days, the 3-letter IMOs, you all know what I'm talking about, operate in the multi-level marketing world. They're trying to make money on you even if you don't make a sale. Their orientation is around mass recruitment, passing off garbage leads as awesome leads to make money off you even if you never sell anything. And you got to be suspicious and question what you're seeing. But you see a lot more of that in the independent space. But I would say you do see a good bit of that certainly in the captive space. But the most obvious right now definitely is in the independent space. Last on here, which may seem a little unusual, is that the biggest drawback, I think, and it kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier, but I'd like to make this clear. There's a lot more autonomy. Wait, that's a drawback of being independent? Yeah, to some extent. I talk a lot about the benefits of being an independent agent is the freedom of the autonomy. But what I've discovered is sometimes there's a responsibility with freedom, right? We've all heard that term. And that's certainly the case in business too. And the problem is that if you have too much autonomy without direction or accountability or guidance, you have the freedom to screw up and the autonomy to screw up as bad as you want to. And that is not good for the business. It's not good for you or the possible clients you could serve. So you have to learn how to cultivate and harbor and control the autonomy with an equal amount of accountability and direction, and have guideposts to guide you in the right direction. This is the one big thing we've made at the Ford Insurance Group, because I used to preach, and still do to a certain extent, how we offer freedom and autonomy to run your business like you want to. But I realized that we absolutely needed more guideposts and direction in the process of getting started, because we would recruit a lot of people by the end of, for years, that never did anything. They would come on Zoom calls, love to join, but they would never actually pull the trigger. And that's a problem. It's a waste of our resources. It's a waste of our time. And more importantly, you're not doing the thing that really you should be, which is helping people. You've got this license, and I would argue it's an obligation that you should be putting to work to help people. So what we've done to counter that is to offer mentorship. Mentorship really is the X factor, as I've said many a times, to what it is that we do. Having mentorship, one of the biggest benefits is the accountability. You know what to study. You're given directions on homework to do to better prepare yourself to sell. If you start to have wayward thoughts and directions and concerns, you got somebody in your corner that will help you through things. And while this sounds very intangible, the benefits are just fantastic. I never realized till we started this how many people out there benefit from having a pro in their corner that they can sit down with in their first couple of weeks, one-on-one, not just a group call or a text message to be answered in days, but to sit down one-on-one and address concerns. But you don't get that in a lot of organizations on the independent side. It's probably the biggest complaint. They'll say they're going to train you. I got this morning from, I think, a new agent said, hey, this organization said they got the greatest training program ever, and that they're going to provide so much support. And then when I got in, training was a 15-minute video describing the product, showing how to quote, and then saying to start making calls and dials. Guy felt totally lost and didn't even know what to do, as we all would, I think we can all agree to. So that's what you'll get a lot in the independent world is, hey, you're independent, figure this stuff out. And while that's true to a certain extent, you tend to not get the same level of support and mentorship like what we would do. And even though we're independent, it's just not the norm in this business. So you got to be very concerned about, in the independent world, how much training will you really get? Because the autonomy sometimes means figure it out. But let's talk about the takeaways from today's broadcast on being captive versus independent. It's hopefully obvious to you where I stand on this. I am an independent agent. I'm an independent thinker. I do my own thing. I'm an entrepreneur by default. My father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My uncle's pretty much an entrepreneur. I'm a stubborn person. I don't play well with others. Well, used to. I'm fine now. But being an independent entrepreneur and an independent agent suits me perfectly. I'm not married to any company. I'm married to my clients. It's my clients that matter. I'm going to take care of them. And I can't sleep at night if I'm pushing products. Eventually, I won't be able to take it. If I feel like I'm in a position that I'm supposed to help people, but I'm not. I'm helping the company, and I am beholden to them. I sound like an employee, and I don't want to be an employee. I want to be a businessman. I want to be an independent operator, and I want to hold what my clients expect of me, which is to help them with valuable coverage. So for me, I'm an independent agent through and through. I can't see myself ever being beholden to one company. It just isn't in my DNA. So for me, that's kind of my bias as far as I'm concerned with my personality. But that doesn't mean everybody should go the independent route. There are agents flat out that will perform better in a captive environment, that try as I might to say, put blinders on, restrain yourself, seek mentorship and accountability in an independent fashion. There are agents who just won't do it. They don't have the capacity now as a newbie to self-control as well as we'd like to. And it's hard to admit that as a person who's on that side of the deal, but there are people out there who are like that fare better in a much more micromanaged, controlled environment where it's purposely simplified. And while you don't have all the advantages of being independent, you have the advantages of having micromanagement and direction imposed upon you versus suggested to you like you would in an independent model. So captive does make sense at times because of that. But I think ultimately the problem with captivity is that you're captive. It goes back to what I said originally. You're beholden. And while it may start off fine, many a times if you don't have this prior perception of what the business is like, you'll find yourself 12 months in, not happy with the product you're pushing because it's inferior in some ways, knowing that you're not doing the best job for your clients because it's overpriced sometimes or not the appropriate coverage at times. And worse yet, you discover that your contract restricts you from freely moving because you risk losing sometimes tens and thousands of dollars in residual income because they don't vest you in many cases. I know captive companies, one has a 2-year restriction, another has a 3-year, another has a 10-year restriction. And now you got to play the game and sell out even more if you want to stick around and still get paid, as many of these people end up doing. They get paid too much and the money compromises that ultimate value system. You don't want to be in that position. I don't think it's good to build a business like that. And I don't think it's right anyway if you have a problem with it, which, many people arrive to by seeing it and living it. So choose your path wisely. You know how I feel and which direction I would say go. But maybe captivity is right for you too. You can always make a transition later. One of my good agents came from a one company carrier. If I mention the name, you know who it was. Wrote business for 2 years and had the same kind of determination for himself that being independent was better for himself, for his clients, and that he had to, if he were to continue to be honest with himself, go independent because it gave his clients the best options. It was just the best deal for them. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Hope this helped clarify some things.